As a precaution, employees across the nation were sent home from work today on a voluntary basis. NASA employees at the Johnson Space Center here in Houston were among those who were asked to evacuate. Fox 26's Dominique Keith is working on that story.
Horrified. I mean, it's just a real tragedy.
Just shock and disbelief. It was like watching a movie.
But it wasn't a movie.
New York Post. Incredible damage. Still no idea how many people were killed in that in those two towers. Although as many as 50,000 people worked there. No idea how many got out alive. No idea how many are still luckily surviving in the wreckage if they can make it through the night. Let's go now to Fox correspondent Catherine Herridge at St. Vincent's Hospital, where many of the injured and burned and maimed have been taken today.
If this is indeed state-sponsored terrorism, how will that affect our response?
Well, Jerome, that was a very important thing, because he's now putting these countries on notice that if you have these terrorists inside your country, we're not going to respect your sovereignty, and we're going to treat you in the same as we do them as the enemies of the United States. Now, that does two things. One, it commits us to act against governments that do support terrorism against us, but also it puts a lot of pressure on them. If the Taliban want to avoid a direct confrontation with the United States, they should be rounding up Mr. Osama bin Laden and his cohorts for turning over to the international community for trial.
Dr. Hatchett, one other thing. In terms of the U.S. response to this, certainly Americans are watching very closely.
Raising hope and a brighter future. This group gathered at the First United Methodist Church in downtown Houston.
God wants to hear from us when we're sad and when we grieve for others, and that God has compassion on the whole nation, and this is our way of communicating with Him and He with us.
A similar scene a few miles away at Second Baptist Church. Pastors took turns holding several vigils for hundreds of congregation members.
The most important thing that each individual has to do is have praise with our Lord and our Father.
Today I was praying that once we figured out who did it, we could find forgiveness for them, because they're driven by things we can't understand.
Over in the Heights neighborhood, residents also united in prayer and song. All Saints Catholic Church organized a special Mass, a time for reflection and remembrance.
Our heart is just absolutely breaking for all of the families who have lost loved ones today, and the only thing I can do to bring consolation to myself and to be of some help to those poor people is to come in Mass and just pray and just pour out my heart to God and just beg for mercy upon America.
If you were not able to make any services tonight, more services will be held tomorrow and in upcoming days. For more information, times, and locations, you can log on to our webpage, click2houston.com, or call the local house of worship of your choice. We are live in downtown Houston.
People running and thinking, oh my God, our daughter is in there.
Pam Gellermini still can't believe what transpired today in New York and how her daughter survived the country's worst terrorist attack ever. 24-year-old Nicole Gellermini was on the 61st floor, Tower 2, her second day on the job for Morgan Stanley Dean Witter when the plane crashed into Tower 1.
The training stopped. The instructor, I guess, was told to evacuate the students.
Nicole, along with several co-workers, got to the 44th floor to switch elevators when they were told everything was fine. They could go back up. Most everyone did, but Nicole and a few others.
And she just hesitated, her and some friends hesitated going back to the 61st floor. She said another minute later was when her building was struck by the plane.
At that point, it was pandemonium as those who could tried getting out. Nicole descended 44 flights of stairs as debris in her tower were slowly burning and coming down.
But when she did make it out, the building came down.
A lot of the people that were in her training group went back up, and she said, Mom, they died.
Somebody was looking out for them. We're just grateful and thankful to God that she made the
Países libres y democráticos están trabajando conjuntamente porque saben que si pasa en los Estados Unidos va a pasar en sus países también. Así que esto va a ser un grupo.
The crash of that plane over which you toiled so tirelessly, there was a second disaster. New York City has the ability to mobilize relief forces like maybe no other in the world. Thousands of police officers converged on World Trade Center, police officers and firemen before the World Trade Center collapsed on them. How is it possible that the most powerful and informed nation in the history of planet Earth could not know that an enormous coordinated attack on 4 fronts against the 2 towers of the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and presumably Camp David was happening and nobody knew?
Well, that's the question that everyone will be looking for answers to. But let me tell you this, the notion that we would know everything in the world and will know the intentions of every madman operating in small cells in the world, and that through technical resources and through limited people on the ground around the world over the course of the last couple of decades.
God police everybody there. Civilians, firefighters, police.
You were supposed to be on the 22nd floor?
That's right.
What? You were on your way into work?
I was late. I guess it wasn't my number.
What are you going to be doing for the next hour?
It wasn't my number.
President Bush has said, still standing, following its twin, collapsing, vanishing in a cloud of smoke. By 11 o'clock, the sense of alarm had spread across the country. Troops standing guard as national landmarks were shut down. Fighter jets actually patrolling the skies.
Good evening, I'm Mike Barajas.
And I'm Melissa Wilson. You're watching continuing coverage of the attack on America.
We want to update you on what's going on locally in the wake of this tragedy. The Houston Fire and Police Departments are holding a joint vigil for their fellow comrades and innocent victims killed and injured by today's terrorist attack.
Fox 26's Ned Hibbert is live in downtown Houston. Ned, it's been one emotional day. How are people at the vigil handling this tragedy?
Mike, Melissa, they've come here to hear words of comfort at the Sacred Heart Co-Cathedral in downtown Houston. The scene repeating itself all over the country. People gathering in hopes of gaining understanding through spiritual sources or academic.
Not too many smiles on campus today.
Dr. David Schneider teaches social psychology at Rice University. He says a terrorist act like the one we all witnessed today strikes at the core of our country.
There's a tremendous sense of vulnerability that occurs when this happens. That Americans are prone to think that things like that can't happen here, that they happen in some uncivilized part of the world.
But it was the very symbol of Western civilization that was brought down this morning. And as citizens seek to understand the attack, many are turning to a house of worship. Lakewood Church is one of dozens of Houston area sanctuaries opening their doors to the tearful and people searching for comfort in the pages of the Bible.
We can be a comfort. We can comfort these people. Peter, because J.D. was saying, as well as Don earlier, in case you didn't hear us, that it is carpeted up. And then we saw the people jumping. We saw what we thought was debris, and we realized it was people jumping.
I started seeing people just they started jumping out of the window, like the 96th floor, and they just started one at a time in different parts of the building. I just started seeing people just drop. And I must have counted like 30 or 40 people,
Rescue workers raced to the scene, but then, some 90 minutes after the attack,
oh my God, they're around!
soot and rubble were everywhere, and with it, chaos.
Get out of here!
What scared me the most was the panic, and people were running. We just saw this great big cloud of dust just coming from the center of the building and mushrooming out towards the river. There was people had no place to go. People were going to jump in the river. They were going to swim. They were jumping on a boat. They were breaking glass to get into nearby homes and restaurants. There was, dust and whatnot everywhere. But it was
Firefighters and police officers found themselves momentarily helpless. Trained to save others, they suddenly had to save themselves.
For war, we've been attacked, like World War II, World War III.
Tonight, crews are standing by to start searching for the thousands of people feared missing in the debris. James Walker, ABC News, New York.
Well, you hear fire. Nobody is accustomed to tragedy to a greater extent than firefighters. And you hear a firefighter there describing it as World War II. I want to go back and reach into our earlier coverage today for a couple of things. But I know that most of the people at ABC News bureaus around the country are out covering the story. Any of them who we can get to come in and give us some sense of the mood of the country as a whole at the moment would be very much appreciated, even if they call in telephone. A little earlier today, ABC's Lynn put together a package for us in which we asked someone to take the radar monitoring that the federal agency.
This morning that we have seen a live picture of the President of the United States, who has spent much of the rest of the day in the air aboard Air Force One, going from one U.S. military base to another, ultimately declining to go along with the recommendations of some of his security people that he go to the North American Air Defense Command inside of a mountain and hover there until people gave the all clear. President's advisors were not pleased with that request, felt it made the president look in an inappropriate light, and the result of that was the decision to come back here this evening, and that is what we are watching unfold as we speak here. It's not exactly clear that the president is going to speak.
Is the very hardest to stop. There is no piece of equipment, no scanner, no screener that absolutely can stop a terrorist who is willing to die. Dan?
Bob Orr live in Washington, just as you see a live photograph of President Bush stepping off Marine One, the helicopter that brought him from Andrews Air Force Base, where Air Force One took him a few moments ago. A salute to the Marine Guard, and a naturally somber-faced president strides in past the beautiful Rose Garden into the White House and into the Oval Office. The president will be addressing the nation tonight at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. That'll be 8 Central.
Of our producers lines 70. Tremendous damage that was done to that corner of that building. You can get a sense from that of the concentric rings. The Pentagon is really a set of buildings arranged together, five rings of the Pentagon, and so far, as you can see there, although badly damaged, only one corner of the outer ring was hurt, but it has spread inside
New York City. Called from off-duty, called from vacation, Renee Davila was the first EMS supervisor at the scene.
I was there, and I saw the building collapse. We all started running. I ended up inside the Hilton somewhere. I was like trapped. I don't know where I was. I couldn't find my way out with all the smoke and the debris in there. I finally just closed the door behind me and covered it so no more smoke and debris would come in. And what I did was I called my wife. I told her I love her.
Anybody volunteer? Many New Yorkers rushed downtown to volunteer. These construction workers were from Iron Workers Local 40.
What's the job in there? Whatever it is, to save somebody, one person saved, the life saved.
Through the day, an inferno raged in world.
Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world. And no one will keep that light from shining. Today our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature. And we responded with the best of America. With the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks.
One of the towers are not proper for television viewing. Imagine the 50,000 people in there at the time, and now the FBI trying to get to the bottom of how this may have happened. Of course, this is the collapse here. As this collapse was happening, engineers were standing on the roof of our building, which is due north of this, setting up for a live broadcast that I would be giving minutes later. They were running cables, setting up microwave hops, making sure that microphones were working. Peter Blangiforti was on the roof, one of our engineers, when it sounded as if a plane went very low over your head.
Business Apex Securities Incorporated was on the 52nd floor of Tower 1. His employees were inside and ran down 52 flights of stairs. He believes everyone got out, but 2 people are still missing.
We're praying and keeping our fingers crossed. It's certainly a tragedy for the country. And it's a time when obviously we rally around our national leaders and look for revenge.
The senator says there may have been more people killed in this act of terror than died at Pearl Harbor. He, like all of America, wants to know why.
I think that is very much the American way to find out what happened, what went wrong, and what can be done to make sure that it does not happen again.
Then we have some good news. Senator Ellis's office confirms for us all of his employees have now been accounted. Todos los países libres. Ellis's office confirms for us all of his employees.
Wonderful.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
Y está dejando Jorge toda la información a, por supuesto, los miembros de su gabinete. Por eso es que vimos esas largas conferencias de prensa del del secretario de Defensa, del Procurador General, del secretario del Transporte, del secretario de Salud. Esas son las personas que él ha asignado para que tomen control de cada una de las diferentes áreas que han sido afectadas después de estos actos terroristas. Él simplemente nos está diciendo a través de sus palabras de que va a hacer todo lo posible y que Estados Unidos no se va a quedar vulnerable ante esos actos terroristas y que ha ordenado que se tomen todas las medidas necesarias para que Estados Unidos no sea vulnerable ante los actos terroristas y sobre todo para que se tomen las represalias necesarias no únicamente en contra de los terroristas sino en contra de aquellos países. Ese es un mensaje, Jorge, a aquellos países que apoyan y que dan albergue a terroristas o supuestos terroristas.
Yo creo que quizás Lourdes nos puedes ayudar a analizar a qué países pudiera estarse refiriendo el presidente norteamericano George W. Bush cuando dice no únicamente atacaremos a los terroristas sino también a quienes los apoyan.
All ends. And then my eyes diverted up to people just in a stream just coming down backwards.
You must have, I mean, clearly it was disturbing to you. For those who were...
Oh, yeah. I mean, I sat there in tears, and people next to me were in tears, as if it was their family members falling down.
It must have been a scene of people just horrified. And in shock.
Horrified. And that's when really the mayhem really started. I mean, beforehand it was really organized by police. You know, they escorted you to the side and really controlled the situation. And at that point, it just was mayhem. People just running all over, people screaming, and then all of a sudden the building collapsed after that. It just came down layer by layer, very slowly down, and looking like it was almost imploded.
And you saw it as it came down?
I saw it as it came down, and then I saw the smoke just heading towards us, and I just saw people. And I was, you know, in a clear sight where I knew I was no longer in danger. When the first tower came down, I was fearful that I was in danger. I just heard an explosion, and just hundreds of people just running from east to west.
All right, Nico Wenstrel, if you would, hang on one second. We have a briefing from Police Commissioner Carrick, who is New York City. He's explaining what is going on, the police response. Let's listen.
The street of people who they've been sort of the pariah. They've been condemned to economic sanctions for the terrible thing they did in Kuwait. But this is a totally different thing. You know, that's a chicken and this is a duck. Totally different creature. And when you invade someone's territory with this type of assault, and this direct assault, two things happen. First of all, the regular rules of international law go away because we can retaliate. This is like a warlike condition, and all the power in our Constitution is given to Congress and the President to do just that. The second thing that happens is the first time, I think, in most young people's lives, because they've called me and told me this is the first time they've seen America truly united. No matter what race, creed, color here in America, it's one of the few times people go to bed and saying, we as Americans all stand for one thing, and that's to get these people that did this terrible thing, either militarily or through the legal system.
Now, we talk about the international law. There's one other thing that we got to talk about and focus on in terms of the freedoms and the liberties that we take so dearly in this country, and to see it all be challenged.
You know, Jerome, it's true that in time of war, whenever we're under attack, our constitutional...
Airliners crashed into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, erupting in flames and sending burning workers into stairwells and leaping from the windows of the 110-story building.
Within the hour, two more hijacked airliners crashed. One blasted into the Pentagon. The other, believed to be on its way to attack Camp David, crashed just southeast of Pittsburgh.
Mayhem in the towers, packed with tens of thousands of employees, visitors, and tourists, and one after the other, those twin towers then collapsed.
And Americans across the country rallying to help. The death toll of today's terrorist attacks on America expected to reach deeply into the thousands. The silent rage felt by so many of us.
Police officers at that very moment when that building started to collapse, who were desperately trying to pull people out from the wreckage. CNN is also reporting that the New York fire chief and a deputy fire chief were killed in the destruction, the attack earlier today.
And of course, this is going to be an ongoing, all through the night search, because the longer people